Hello everyone, and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we are into the final stretch of this lovely series about Dawid Janowski. Just a couple more games, and we are starting today with an amazing game. Osip Samuel Bernstein against Dawid Janowski, played in Ostend 1906. Ostend was a quite incredible tournament. Actually, it feels a bit like the TCC. Every time you think the tournament's finished, another final comes along and the tournament continues. And I simply cannot believe what they put the players through. Janowski started really, really well, and somewhere, I think in the middle, he lost the will to live and finished quite poorly. But it was an amazingly long and complicated tournament. This game was mentioned as the most interesting of Ostend 1906, so played between Bernstein and Janowski, and we're going to have a look how it happened. It was a very, very interesting game. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, and now d6. Some sort of delayed Steinitz. White's got plenty of ideas here. C3 actually is quite interesting, suggested by Stockfish against Dragon, knight e4, d4, which is quite interesting. I hadn't seen that one before, though maybe it's well known. Rook e1 was played by Dragon. Actually, we just end up in a normal Lopez there, c3, castles, h3. And now actually Dragon wanted to play the Zaitsev with bishop b7. What Bernstein did was quite interesting, quite normal as well. He took on c6, and after b takes c6, played d4, and giving up the bishop pair, but you're damaging the black queenside structure, and you're also getting in d4 and basically getting rid of that e5 pawn. So White's going to have a bit of a space advantage there. E takes d4, and now knight takes d4. And here Janowski played very aggressively. I mean, he played the whole game with a lot of energy. Some of it slightly misplaced, maybe at times, but a lot of energy. He played the move c5 to start with, and White's got to decide where to put the knight. Now, you sort of wonder whether Bernstein was following Tarrasch and also Janowski in this, because he put the knight back to e2, and we've seen this in quite a few games played by Tarrasch and also by Janowski as well. The knight comes round to g3, and White gets ready to play b3, bishop b2, and we've got pressure along the long diagonal, and the knight can come into f5 at a good moment. Actually, the engine's quite like the move knight c6, queen d7, knight a5, and the idea of that is that this knight is stopping the bishop getting to b7, so yeah, interfering with black's development, also bringing the queen to d7, but it gets quite interesting. Queen a4 was the continuation of my engine games, queen e1, bishop e7, and now there's a couple of moves here, but c4 was what Stockfish played against Dragon. Castles, bishop d2, rook e8, bishop c3. Then White's going to follow up with knight d2. And, here Black decides, this was Dragon decided that the queen on a4 had caused enough disruption, and then queen d7, and then c6 played, and queen c7, and Black's playing for d5. Yeah, very difficult specific chess there, but I mean, Black seems to be pretty okay, but this move knight c6 and then knight a5 definitely more challenging to stop Black from playing bishop b7. Well, after knight e2, Janowski played bishop b7, and after knight g3 he played the interesting move g6, and I'm pretty sure that this was stimulated by his experiences on the white side and also knowledge of Tarrasch's games. The bishop is coming to g7 just to neutralize any white squared bishop coming to the long diagonal, and of course with g6 you're stopping the knight from coming into f5. So Bernstein played rook e1, and now knight d7 was played. Funnily enough, the engines thought that bishop g7 was perfectly fine, and after e5 you just take and go king f8. and well, I mean, something like knight c3, just exchange off queens, play knight d5, play c4, and black's actually doing quite well. A little bit of a problem getting this king active, but you're actually going to play f5 and king f7 and develop that way, and then, well, it's got the two bishops. Yeah, slightly broken pawn structure. That's the compensation that white has for the two bishops, but I think I'd rather be black in this position. So bishop g7 was interesting, but yeah, I can't fault Janowski's move knight d7. I mean, that does feel like the a safe way to play, and also, of course, you know, you're going to be first on the long diagonal, so, you know, b3, we get bishop g7 in. So c4 was played by Bernstein. Actually, one move that that the Engines played was bishop d2, with the idea of meeting bishop g7 with bishop c3, which I think is quite interesting there. Perfectly fine for black, but yeah, I think you know, quite a nice, decent move there. But c4 was played by Bernstein, and then bishop g7, queen c2. And now we get one of those rare moments where Janowski played a move that I would have thought would be the Engine's, and the Engine won a move that I would have thought would be Janowski's. Because Janowski played the move h5, just going after this knight on g3. Yeah, castles was what the Engine wanted, knight c3, queen h4, and well, I mean, stuff like bishop d4, knight e5 to g4, and f5 is coming in. Pretty dangerous with this bishop, you know, active along the long diagonal there. But yeah, I mean, who could resist h5? Yeah, you just want to play h4 to h3, and yeah, and just create a lot of counterplay. So h3 was played by Bernstein, and that was definitely safe. And now h4 from Janowski. Again, the Engines are not so keen on this, but I just find it a very natural plan. Knight f1 and again knight e5, and you're noticing that Janowski is not yet castling kingside, and yeah, I mean, this is quite original strategy actually, but the idea is yeah, you know, he's keeping all his options open. I mean, he might want to play you know, just the king out to f8 and then activate the rook via h5, for example. That could be one possibility. Knight d2 was played. The Engines don't like that particularly. They'd rather white just play the knight to c3. Obviously, knight takes c4 allows queen a4 check. Knight d2 does feel a little bit odd. But Bernstein had a very reasonable idea. The idea after queen d7 is that he plays rook b1, and the idea here is to play b4. Just yeah, you know, open up the queen side a little bit. You know, after c takes b4, you take on b4. You can play c5 as well, and also get the bishop actively on the diagonal. So Janowski played a5, and now b3, and now Janowski did something well, quite extraordinary, incredibly modern, and I'm sure that he'd been thinking about this for quite a few moves already. The Engines want knight c6, which is very, very sensible, just looking to invade onto d4 or maybe onto b4. But Janowski played the move castles queenside. And I mean, really, I love this. I think this is such good play from Janowski, so original, you know, just showing, you know, very, very little fear as well, and you know, he's kept all his options open. He's played h5, h4, now castling queenside with this pawn played to a5. But yeah, he's also got ideas like playing f5, for example, just to break things open. It's really incredible strategy, and if you told me this was a game of AlphaZero as black, I would probably, you know, against Stockfish 8, I would probably have believed you. It simply reminds me of that sort of play, even if the Engines are not amazingly keen on what black is doing. It's still only, you know, it's just sort of around even, or maybe a slight advantage to white. You know, it's not huge, but the Engines just thought there were, you know, other. You could achieve the same, I guess, with safer means, but I just think this is incredible play. So bishop b2 played, and now f5, and now knight e3. I mean, the key thing about Bernstein is that he plays this very, very solidly. He really keeps his pieces, you know, nicely centralized, and doesn't really give anything away. And yeah, Janowski finds it hard to get through. And I was a bit surprised, actually. You know, when I played through this game, first of all, I was assuming that black already had a slight to a clear advantage, but actually the engines are saying, yeah, white's perfectly fine in this position. Surprises me a little. Black looks so active, but somehow Janowski doesn't find a way to blast open the centre, and the engines don't really find it either. They're looking at playing knight c6. Again, with a little idea of knight b4, and if a3, rook h f8, just protecting the f5 pawn, and who knows, maybe lining up an f4, f3 sacrifice together with knight with knight d4. Sorry. So knight d5, and then rook d8, and then e takes f5, bishop b2, knight e5. Well, black's threatening knight d3. We're threatening queen f5 here. If queen c2, queen f5, knight e4, rook e6. I still quite like black somehow, but black still has to be a little bit careful because there's going to be stuff like b4, and it's not. Yeah, black's got activity, but it's not 100% clear how you're really breaking through on the king side there. But yeah, still lots of interesting play in there. So that was the engine idea, and to be honest, the engines were looking at knight c6 on many moves, just looking to head for that d4 square. Janowski played f4, and after knight d5 he played g5, but here Bernstein played actually a very strong move here, which was to play the move f3. And somehow, yeah, black's going to find it really difficult to break through on the king side, especially if after a move like, for example, rook d g8, white plays what Stockfish wanted to play, which was bishop takes e5. So takes, knight f1, queen g7, knight h2. We're just going to get this knight into g4, really just block everything up, and then we're going to play for a3 and b4 and try and break things up towards the black king side. That would be a pretty tricky position to play for black. Really hard to see black achieving much on the king side. The engines thought that they could hold it as black, but it does look pretty nasty. Janowski played knight c6, and it's just a hard position for black to play, really. Not very obvious how you're supposed to carry on, and actually from now on Bernstein played very strongly. He was really playing moves that the engine likes an awful lot. So just taking on g7 and now playing a3, and just want to play b4, break open that queen side, and then aim at that black king. And somehow, yeah, it's just Janowski's played incredibly inventively, but somehow things have just gone a bit wrong, and now it's a question of how can black survive here. So knight d4 played, queen d3, and now c6, and that's a pretty decent idea, I think. You need some space for the king to move up, so that the black rooks can come over and sort of challenge on the A and B file. So you need to move the knight back. And now queen e5 from Janowski. That's actually a pretty decent idea, because you've really got to watch out for white playing e5 and then bringing a knight into e4 afterwards. So queen e5 played, and now king h1 from Janowski, from Bernstein rather, which is a pretty decent move. Actually, the engines were quite interesting. They wanted to play this move knight d1, king c7, knight f2, again making sure the king side's completely safe. And then you just want to play knight g4, chase the queen away, and then play e5. For example, rook a8, knight g4, and then e5 here. And bishop c8 takes knight e4, and yeah, you can tell this has gone a little bit nasty for black. We've got weaknesses everywhere. Everywhere now, and b4 is also coming in. So yeah, dragon beat Stockfish in this position a couple of times actually. So yeah, knight d1 was probably very strong, but king h1 is also good. I mean, you're just preparing to play b4 and getting the king off this long diagonal. So king c7 played, and now b4. A takes b4, a takes b4, and then rook a8. I mean, this is, these positions are just really it's hard for black, really. I mean, white's got a lot of good stuff, but this is a pretty decent idea. I mean, we're stopping white from playing anything like knight a4, and we're also looking to play something, maybe at some stage like rook a3 and pin the knight to the queen. Now, obviously, you've got discovered attacks. I mean, that's possible, so with checks, so you've got to watch out. And also, by putting the rook on a8, we're getting ready to play rook b8 and then bishop c8. It's a very sensible idea, this one. So b takes c5 was played. I'm not going to ruin it by saying what the engine wanted here, because this is actually what Bernstein does in a couple of moves, so I don't want to ruin that surprise for you. But there was already an interesting idea in this position, so if you want to have a think about it, then take a look at it, and then your insight will be rewarded later. But b takes c5, and now d takes c5, because if queen takes c5, then e5 follows, and this is just very, very nasty. de, we go queen g6, and we're coming in with stuff like knight e4 and queen g7, and we're also attacking along here. It just collapses all of a sudden. So, you know, d takes c5 is definitely required here, just to hold the d4 knight and keep the queen on e5. Rook b2 played by Bernstein, and then rook d8, vaguely sort of putting some threats against the white queen, but it's not completely clear yet. Rook eb1, again another move was possible, but we'll see what I mean. And here bishop c8 was played by Janowski, and that's pretty natural, you know, just so, you know, in terms of defensive posture, I thought that black did a pretty good job. You know, the rook covering the a file, so no entry points there. We've, you know, kept the white pieces to the b file, and we're covering the entry point with the bishop on c8. At the same time, you know, the bishop's sort of looking this way, so yeah, you know, not 100% clear there. Yeah, I mean, we've also got some threats here, you know, rook on d8 and queen on d3 there, so, you know, who knows. However, what white did here was a lovely idea, really lovely, maybe, you know, born of the need to do something about the b file, but about the d file rather, but knight d5 check was played. C takes d5, and then c takes d5. And what is the idea? Well, the idea is simply that we've got stuff like knight c4 coming in, then the rook's going to come in, and we're going to start moving these pawns, and this king is just going to be caught, you know, in the onrush basically. So Janowski maybe didn't play the very best engine move, but already, you know, the engines here are losing a lot of games as black. Janowski played a very natural move, which is bishop a6. Just to stop the white knight from coming easily to c4, queen c3 was the move that the engines preferred the most, but queen a3, you know, is another good idea, and I can thoroughly understand it. I mean, you're aiming for the same things, right? I mean, you're just aiming for either for a5 or to take the c5 pawn. It's just that queen c3 also pins this knight on d4 to the queen on e5. You know, that's also quite a useful thing to have, and you know, if you manage to get rid of the c5 pawn, then the knight on d4 might be hanging, so it's just a little bit better. But queen a3 is also a pretty strong move here. So black played rook dc8, giving away the c5 pawn if white wants it, but preparing to be able to bring the king away that way, basically on the back rank, keeping away from a rook on the 7th. And now a very nice move from Bernstein there, rook b6. This rook's really, really strong. I mean, you're threatening rook a6, you're cutting across the 6th rank, got ideas like d6, and you've still got, you know, loads of ideas like queen takes c5, for example, in the air. So yeah, this looks very, very difficult, and here Janowski didn't play the best move, but it was a very ingenious move. It was the move bishop b5. So you're stepping out of attack, you're uncovering an attack on the white queen, and now you're also attacking the rook on b6. And the following is a quite extraordinary moment, because I would have told you really that there was only one move that white could play in this position, and that is obvious, and anything else is total rubbish. But of course, it's the one move that the engine does not want to play. The point is that after Bernstein's move, queen takes c5, the engines are giving 0.00. What is the move that the engines want? The engines want this move, queen c3. Now, what is the point of queen c3? The point of queen c3 is that, first of all, the rook is not hanging, because after king b6, we've got knight c4 check, which is very nice. Of course, what we're threatening as well is just rook takes b5 here, and we've got this pin on the knight, so you won't be able to take back. And if you play a move like bishop e2, well, I've got a number of possibilities. Rook e6 is quite nice, again exploiting that pin. But rook g6 was what the engines were playing. King d8, rook b7. We're sort of encircling black somehow. We're threatening rook g8 here, which is very unpleasant. So queen h8 was the engine idea. But then knight b3, and yeah, you know, the problem is we're just coming in now. You know, we're threatening knight c5, we're threatening knight d4. We could have stuff like e5. Yeah, you know, black's just really in all sorts of problems here, and yeah, it didn't take long for you know, Dragon to beat Stockfish from this position. So this move queen c3 is just incredible. I mean, basically, you know, it's just introducing this threat, exploiting the pin of the knight on the queen, and yeah, black can't maintain this b-file barrier, and then afterwards we're just coming in with our rooks and coming in with our knight, and yeah, black's got plenty of moves but nothing to do with them. So that is a quite amazing moment in actual fact. I mean, queen c5 just looks so natural, but after king d7, somehow, yeah, white doesn't have a very easy follow-up. And the key thing is, in fact, that the white queen is really short of squares. And actually, that black can keep on attacking the white queen with no problem at all. You'll see what I mean. So rook b7 check played, king e8. I think if queen b6, I think we've just got rook a6 in this position, which is rather embarrassing. And when you play queen b4, well, I've actually got a few different moves, but rook a4 was Janowski's idea, and that was perfectly fine. Rook a4, chasing the queen on b4. Again, very few moves. Queen b2, and now, yeah, the engines actually want to play the move rook b8, but even Janowski's move rook c2 is also pretty good. I mean, the queen is trapped here, right? The queen is actually trapped. Can you believe this somehow? I mean, you know, for this move bishop b5. And after queen c5 check, basically almost forced, the white queen is completely without squares. It's an amazing tactic. I mean, incredible spot from Janowski there. But Bernstein was a really strong player, the sort of guy who you know, never sort of gave up easily, and never just let himself be cowed by his opponents. And he found the lovely resource rook c1. The idea being rook b2. We've got rook c8 checkmate. Just kind of without noticing it, the black king has been pinned to the back rank there. So after rook c1, Janowski took on c1 and queen c1, and we've got a very sharp position here. The engines think it's completely even, but yeah, you know, what can you say? It's just it's still a very complicated position. I mean, I think if I was black in this position, I'd be thinking, okay, got past everything. It's you know, time for me to win now. But actually, the engines think that it's just drawn here. So bishop d7 was played to stop the queen giving checkmate on c8. But that's a bit nasty because it allows knight takes c4. But here Janowski decided to take a bit of dramatic action here, and it's a very fine idea. Only it doesn't quite work. I mean, queen f6 was played in the game Stockfish against Dragon, and they agreed to draw here. Of course, yeah. What can you say? But yeah, I made them play on a few more games. Rook b8 check, king f7. We go e5. And now the engines want to take on c4, and this is a slightly better idea because after queen c4 we go queen e5. So after rook c4, if you go e6 check, knight takes e6, and well, it's going to be very similar to the other line. So let's just show that one: queen c4, queen takes c5, d6 check, bishop e6, queen b4. Still quite sharp. I still wouldn't like to say for certain that this is drawn, but the engines thought that they could hold this with black. Problem is, obviously, you know, if the queen and rook stray too far, then we've just got all sorts of perpetuals. Desperado sacrifice with knight takes f3 as well. So the likelihood is that black will manage to find a draw there, but still very, very sharp. What Janowski did was he took on c4 straight away, and after queen c4 he played this move knight takes f3, and it's a very, very nice idea. I mean, you're splitting up the white king side. You're actually threatening queen a1 checkmate there as well. And well, after g takes f3, then Janowski started giving checks, and then played this move queen e1, and well, impossible to stop queen g3 check with well, lots of checks going to happen, and well, we've also got lots of pawns that we're going to capture. So yeah, you know, it's a pretty good chance for black there of achieving a draw. The amazing thing is that Bernstein in this position had a win, which is a quite incredible move. I mean, have a look to see if you can find it, maybe pause the video. It's it's beautiful geometry again, because white plays the move queen a6, covering a1 and threatening queen g6 check, and that is pretty good. So you play queen c3 in this position, so you can also cover c8. So for example, if you play queen a8 check, I could even play bishop c8 in this position, the queen's covering, and then I can give some checks. So queen g6 check, king f8, we give some checks, simply because we can, rook b8, bishop c8, and now this move rook b1. So just leaving the knight hanging there, and we're threatening queen h5 check. And the rook on b1, of course, is covering everything there. So knight d2, and now queen h5, and now we start picking up the pawns and going rook d1. And well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's just rather difficult for black. I mean, got lots of checks. I'm going to have a queen takes h4 check. I'll be able to play queen takes f4. We're going to end up with rook and a lot of pawns for the two pieces. And knight takes e4 just to be certain. We've got queen e7 check, picking up the knight. So queen a6, that was the move. Stopping queen a1, ignoring that knight. There's no immediate threat, and then also creating threats against the black king. But Bernstein played she takes f3, check, queen e1, and now you have the feeling that the players, they felt it was time. Rook b8 check, king f7, check, bishop e6, rook b7, king f8, and here I think they agreed a draw in this position, simply because there's no way for the queen to give a direct check, and after queen takes c6 we just go queen e2, check, check, with a draw. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed that game. It was I thought it was amazing, simply amazing. I mean, I thought that Janowski's opening play was just really gorgeous. You know, culminating in this idea castle queenside, having played a5 the move before. Really a Leela-ish, AlphaZero-ish sort of concept, to be honest. But I was very impressed with how Bernstein, sort of kept his position solid in the centre, didn't do anything, just let that wave of energy flow over him and then start hitting back. And yeah, I mean, this move knight d5 was absolutely lovely. But this moment, you know, with this bishop a6, this lovely move bishop b5, just giving away that c5 pawn, and of course the engine resource, not taking the c5 pawn but queen c3, just leaving this rook hanging on b6 because of knight c4 check, you know, is just absolutely outstanding. But I mean, the idea that, you know, in this position somehow white's so unfortunate that that his queen is trapped, but then it's not even losing because we've got rook c1 with this back rank mate, you know, for as a resource. I mean, quite amazing. And then yeah, you know, this lovely idea from Janowski, and then this quite brilliant refutation from the engines. It's yeah, I mean, I can understand why this game was put down as one of the most interesting of the tournament, because yeah, it is really, you know, chock-a-block full of content. And yeah, I mean, some mistakes, but yeah, you know, not so many that you'd be ashamed to have this as one of your own games, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, once again, really impressed with Janowski and all the things that he's coming up with. You know, making it all up really, you know, from his own ideas and understanding, you know, but not really on the basis of he couldn't have learned stuff like this in the books. It's just you know, it's just imagination basically and creativity. So yeah, really impressive. So there we are. You know, I hope you enjoyed that game. It's not a very well-known one anymore, so yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. And well, I've got one more game for you in this series of Dawid Janowski, and do stay tuned for the next video, because it is simply the most bananas game that Janowski ever played. And well, there's quite a lot of competition for that, and I think it's possibly the most bananas game that anyone has ever played. If you haven't seen it, then you're in for an absolute treat. And if you have seen it, I think you're in for a treat too. So stay tuned for that one. Give a like, subscribe to the channel. take a look at my new book, Reengineering the Chess Classics, and otherwise, join me tomorrow for the next video and an absolutely amazing game of Dawid Janowski to round off this series. Thanks very much for watching.